My name is Jessica Adams. I am 31 years old. I am a physical therapist at an outpatient clinic in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I have practiced for 6 years. I work with people recovering from injuries, from surgeries, from conditions that have changed the way they move through the world. My job is partly clinical, the exercises, the manual therapy, the measurement of progress, and partly environmental. I think about how people interact with their physical space. I think about the arrangement of a room, and what it allows, and what it prevents. I think about the relationship between a person and the specific physical context of their daily life. I know that where things are placed matters. I know that the arrangement of a kitchen, the organization of a closet, the layout of a living room, these are not decorative choices. They are functional choices, and they are also personal choices. They are the physical expression of how a person lives in their own home. My mother-in-law, Barbara, visited us for 2 weeks in March. She is a warm woman. She loves her son, my husband Chris, with the full devotion of a mother who has been devoted her whole life. She was helpful during the visit, genuinely, enthusiastically helpful, the kind of helpful that involves constant activity and the particular energy of someone who expresses love through doing. She cooked. She helped with the children. She ran errands. She was present and kind, and the visit, in many respects, was nice. In those same 2 weeks, while I was at work, every day, 5 days a week, for 2 full working weeks, Barbara rearranged, reorganized, discarded, and restructured our home. Every day I came home to a house that was mine in name only. Something had moved. Something had been replaced. Something had been discarded. Something had been installed somewhere it had not been before. I documented 47 changes in 14 days. I am going to tell you about those 47 changes and what they meant and what I did with the documentation. And I am going to tell you about the one question I asked Chris at the end of the 2 weeks that he could not answer. That question is why the 14 days changed something between us. Not broke something, changed something. And the change was necessary. Chris and I have lived in our house in Raleigh for 4 years. It is a 3-bedroom craftsman in a neighborhood that has old trees and sidewalks, and the specific quality of a neighborhood that has been itself for a long time. We bought it the year after we got married, and we have been making it ours since the first weekend we owned it. Our home is, I want to tell you this specifically, intentionally arranged. Not professionally staged, not interior designed beyond our means, but thoughtfully put together by 2 people who care about how they live. I brought the aesthetic sensibility to the arrangement, the care about where things go and why, the consideration of how a space functions versus how it looks. And Chris brought the construction ability, which is significant. He can build, hang, install, and repair, and has done all of these things throughout the house over 4 years with the patient pleasure of someone who likes to make things work well. The kitchen is mine. I want to say that in the specific sense. The kitchen is where I do something I love, which is cook. I am a specific kind of cook, methodical, organized, with a particular relationship to where things are and why they are there. My knives are in a specific order on the magnetic strip because that order is the order of use. My spices are arranged in a specific way because the arrangement makes sense to the way I cook. The pots and pans are organized according to a logic that is mine, and that is functional rather than aesthetic. The kitchen has been arranged over 4 years to support the specific way that I use it. I have described this to Barbara. Not on this visit, over the years, in the casual way that you describe your preferences when you are getting to know a family member. She knows I am particular about the kitchen. She has cooked in it before and has been good about working around my arrangement. She knows the arrangement is mine. Before the visit, Chris and I talked about it. He said, "My mom likes to help. She is going to want to do things." He said it with the ease of someone who was not anticipating a problem, because for Chris, his mother doing things in the house has always been a sign of love. He grew up with Barbara organizing and rearranging and improving, and it registered to him as care. He was not wrong that it was care. He was wrong that it was only care. I said I would like her to ask before she makes changes to things. He said, "She will probably just do small things, Cooking, helping with the kids, maybe organizing a closet or something. I said, I would still like her to ask. He said, I'll mention it to her. He mentioned it to her, she said of course. On the first day of her visit, while I was at work, she reorganized the kitchen. Not the whole kitchen. The whole kitchen happened over 3 days. Day 1 was the spice cabinet, the drawer organization, and the placement of the coffee maker. Day 2 was the pantry. Day 3 was the pots and pans. By the end of day 3, the kitchen I had spent 4 years arranging according to the logic of how I cook was arranged according to Barbara's logic of what a kitchen should look like. Her logic was coherent. It was not mine, and I was working in it. Barbara Adams is 58 years old. She lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, in the house where Chris grew up, which she has maintained in the 22 years since Chris's father passed, with the specific dedication of someone who understands that a house is a record of a family's life and who tends that record carefully. Her house is immaculate. Her house is beautiful. Her house is a monument to a specific vision of domestic organization that she has developed over 30 years, and that she executes with the competence of a professional. She worked for 20 years as an office administrator and retired 3 years ago. She now fills the hours that work had previously occupied with the things she loves: her grandchildren, her church community, her garden, and her house. The house is where she has always been most completely herself. She cooks extraordinarily well. She knows where everything in her home is and why it is there. She has a system for everything. She is also warm. I want to give her this fully because this story is not about a cold or malicious woman. Barbara loves Chris with the completeness of a mother who raised her son alone and who has always put him at the center of her life. She loves our children, our daughter Maya, who is 4, and our son Eli, who is 2, with the specific, hands-on love of a grandmother who has been waiting for grandchildren since long before they arrived. She loves them loudly and specifically, and with the constant motion of someone who expresses love by doing things for the people she loves. The doing is the issue, not the love, the doing. Barbara's love language is service. She shows love by making things better, cleaner, more organized, more functional. This is a real and valuable love language. The problem is that it only functions well when the person being served agrees that the improvement is an improvement, and that agreement requires asking. Barbara does not ask, she does. I have observed this in Barbara across 5 years of knowing her. She does not ask because asking is not how she experiences the desire to help. The desire to help, for Barbara, is immediate and action-oriented. She sees something that could be better and she makes it better. In her own home, this is simply how she lives. In other people's homes, it is a boundary violation. And Barbara does not experience the distinction. This is the key understanding. She is not malicious. She is not aware of the distinction between her home and other people's homes in the way that the distinction requires her to be. Her framework is, I see something that can be improved, I improve it. The fact that the home belongs to someone with different preferences, a different logic for the kitchen, a different way of arranging the children's rooms, a different relationship to what counts as unnecessary, does not register as relevant. She is being helpful. Helpful does not require asking. I want to be precise about why this framing is wrong, because I think the precision matters. The reason asking matters in someone else's home is not etiquette. It is not about manners or formality or the performance of respect. It is because the arrangement of a home is not neutral. It carries meaning. The organization of a kitchen reflects how someone cooks. The arrangement of a child's room reflects how the parents understand the child's needs. What counts as unnecessary is a judgment that reflects values and history. When you change someone's arrangement without asking, you are not simply moving objects. You are overriding their judgment about their own life. Barbara overrode my judgment about my own life 47 times in 14 days. Each override was presented as a gift. I accepted each one in the moment with the courtesy I extended to my husband's mother. And each evening, after the children were in bed and Chris and I were in our own bedroom, I took out my phone and I added the day's changes to a list I had started on day 2, when the pattern became clear enough to document. Barbara arrived on a Saturday in early March. Chris picked her up from the airport. Maya and Eli were excited. They had not seen their grandmother since Christmas, and at 4 and 2, 2 months is a significant portion of your remembered life. She came through the door with the energy of someone who had been looking forward to this visit for weeks, which she had been, and the children climbed on her immediately with the enthusiastic chaos of small people greeting someone they love. The first day was fine. Saturday, no work, everyone home. Barbara and I cooked together. She brought recipes she wanted to show me, which I appreciated, and we worked in the kitchen companionably, and the meal was good and the evening was warm. I thought, this is going to be fine. She was my mother-in-law and she was good with the children, and she and I had a functional relationship, and 2 weeks was a long time but manageable. Sunday was fine. She went to church with Chris in the morning, which they do when she visits. The afternoon was quiet. She helped with the children. She reorganized one shelf in the linen closet, which I noticed but let go because one shelf is not a pattern. She meant well. I let it be. Monday, I went to work. I came home at 5:45 p.m. I put my bag down in the entryway. I walked into the kitchen to start dinner. The spice cabinet had been reorganized. Not slightly reorganized, completely reorganized, alphabetically, from a system I had built around frequency of use. The drawer next to the stove, which had held the utensils I used most in the order I reached for them, had been sorted and expanded to include utensils from 2 other drawers. The coffee maker had been moved from its spot on the counter, where it had been because that was where it was most convenient for how I used it, to a different counter location. Barbara was at the stove making dinner. She said, I did a little organizing today. I hope that is okay. I thought the spices would be easier to find alphabetically. I said, thank you, Barbara. I said it warmly. I meant part of it. And I also knew, standing in my kitchen looking at my moved spices, that the conversation Chris had said he would have had not landed in the way it needed to land. She had been told I preferred things to be asked about before changing. She had reorganized the kitchen anyway. This meant either she had not heard the request or she had heard it and understood it as not applying to the things she was going to do. Either way, the kitchen was different, and I went to bed that night and I opened a new note on my phone. Monday, March 7, spice cabinet reorganized alphabetical was by use frequency. Utensil drawer expanded. Coffee maker relocated. That was day 2. I had not anticipated creating a documentation system. I created one because when I saw the kitchen on Monday evening, I understood that I was looking at the beginning of something that was going to continue, and that the pattern would be clearer with documentation than without it. I did not know, at that point, that it was going to reach 47 entries. I did not know that I was going to need the list to have a real conversation with my husband about what had been happening in our home. I only knew that I needed to keep track. I want to give you the 14 days in the sequence they happened, because the sequence is the story. The drama, and there is drama, even if it is quiet drama, is in the accumulation. Day 1, Sunday, one shelf in the linen closet reorganized. Towels resorted by size rather than color. Small, I noted it but it was minor. Day 2, Monday, spice cabinet, utensil drawer, coffee maker. Day 3, Tuesday, the pantry. This took her all day. She organized the pantry by category: canned goods, grains, snacks, baking supplies, which is a logical organizational system and not the system I had, which was organized by meal prep flow. She also discarded several items she determined were expired or unnecessary. I came home to a pantry that was objectively more organized than I had maintained it, and that did not work the way my pantry worked. 3 items were gone that I had specifically needed: a can of coconut milk, a bag of specific pasta, and a jar of preserved lemons I had been keeping for a specific dish I was planning. She had decided they were unusual and unlikely to be used. Day 4, Wednesday, the children's toy bins in the living room. Maya is 4 and has a specific relationship to her toys. She knows where things are, she has a system. Eli is 2 and less systematic but still aware. Barbara organized the bins by type: blocks in 1, dolls in 1, puzzles in 1. Maya came home from preschool and could not find her stuffed rabbit, which she had placed in a specific bin for specific reasons she had, and that Barbara had not asked about. Maya cried for 20 minutes. I wrote, toy bin reorganization, child distress, 20 minutes. Day 5, Thursday, kitchen part 3. The pots and pans reorganized, the baking supplies consolidated to one cabinet, 3 baking items discarded, a springform pan I had used for a specific cheesecake, a pastry brush, and a zester I used regularly. Day 6, Friday, the garage. This one I was not aware of until Saturday because I do not go into the garage every evening. Chris mentioned on Saturday that his mother had organized the garage. When I looked, it had been rearranged significantly. Tools that had been in a specific location were elsewhere, seasonal items had been moved. A box of things I had been keeping for donation had been discarded. The box contained items I had been saving for a reason, not junk, things I had decided to donate on my timeline. Day 7, Saturday. She did the master bedroom closet while we were at the farmer's market with the children. I came home and could not find my preferred working clothes in the section of the closet where I keep them. They had been moved to a different section. Several items had been folded differently, which means I could not find them by the quick visual scan I used to get dressed in the morning. One item, a specific cardigan I wear constantly, was not in the closet at all. It was in the living room, where she had left it after using it as a prop for some activity with the children. But I did not know this until after I had searched the closet for 15 minutes. Days 8 through 14. I am going to give you the categories rather than the specific days, because the days blur into a pattern. Kitchen continued, 5 more changes, including the reorganization of the refrigerator shelves and the removal of a small magnetic whiteboard from the refrigerator door that I used to track grocery needs and meal plans. She replaced it with a more attractive piece of artwork. The children's rooms, Maya's bookshelf reorganized by color rather than by her own system, Eli's dresser drawers reorganized. The living room furniture was shifted, not dramatically, but the couch moved 2 feet toward the window, which changed the relationship of the seating to the television. Bathroom cabinet reorganized. Outdoor furniture on the back patio rearranged. 47 changes in 14 days. Not 47 times she moved a glass. 47 substantive alterations to the arrangement of our home, each one made while I was at work. Each one presented to me in the evening as a helpful thing she had done. Each one requiring me to either accept it graciously or raise it as an objection, and have the evening become about Barbara's feelings rather than about the change. I did not raise any of them directly during the visit. I documented all of them. And on the day she left, I sat down with my husband. The documentation started on day 2. By the time Barbara's visit ended, I had a notes app entry that was the most detailed record I had kept of anything since graduate school. I want to tell you what the documentation contained, because the format of it matters. Each entry had the date, the location in the house, the specific change, and when applicable, the consequence of the change. The consequence column is the part that converted the list from an accounting of annoyances into an accounting of harm. The preserved lemons I had been keeping for a specific dish, consequence, dish not made. The springform pan, consequence, cheesecake not possible without replacement. The baking items, consequence, 2 recipes I had planned for the following week required purchasing additional supplies. The donation box, consequence, items I had designated for donation were discarded rather than donated, which means the organizations I had in mind did not receive them, and I did not have the satisfaction of an intentional donation. Maya's toy reorganization, consequence, 20 minutes of child distress and a disruption to her understanding of where her things were. The cardigan, 15 minutes of searching and the specific low-level anxiety that comes from not being able to find something you were certain you had. Some of the changes had no consequences I could document. The coffee maker's new location was inconvenient but not harmful. The spices being alphabetical rather than by use was inefficient for me but functional. The furniture shift in the living room was a matter of preference. and some of the consequences were ongoing. The kitchen, as a working space, was less efficient for me after Barbara's visit than it had been before. Not because her system was worse in an absolute sense, it may have been better by some standards, but because it was not my system, and working in a kitchen that is not organized according to your own logic requires constant small adjustments and lookups that add up over time. I am still finding this, weeks later. I reach for something in one place and it is somewhere else. This is not Barbara's fault in any ongoing sense. She is not here, she has not continued changing things. But the kitchen she left is not the kitchen I had, and I work in it every day. The documentation also contained photographs. I had started taking photos on day 4, when the pattern had been clear enough for long enough that I wanted visual evidence. I took before and after photos when I had a before to work with. Some changes, I had photographed the original arrangement of the kitchen the previous week, not anticipating the need, but having done it casually as part of a larger photo series of the house. Some I photographed only the after. By the end of 14 days, I had a 47 entry list with the date, the location, the change, and where applicable the consequence. I had photographs of 19 of the 47. I had spent approximately 45 minutes of my own time, distributed across 14 evenings, documenting what had happened in my home during those days. I was ready to have a conversation with my husband. I want to give you the 47 changes in their categories because the categories tell the story more clearly than any individual change does. The categories are: kitchen 18 changes, storage and closets 9 changes, children's spaces 7 changes, living areas 6 changes, garage 4 changes, outdoor areas 3 changes. Kitchen 18 changes. The spice system, the utensil organization, the coffee maker location, the pantry overhaul, the refrigerator arrangement, the pot and pan storage, the baking cabinet consolidation, the whiteboard removed and artwork installed, several smaller changes to the arrangement of items on the countertops, and the discarding of items I will describe separately. Storage and closets, 9 changes. The linen closet shelf, the master bedroom closet reorganization, the bathroom cabinet, and several smaller closet and cabinet adjustments in various rooms. Children's spaces, 7 changes. Maya's toy bins, Maya's bookshelf organization, Eli's dresser drawers, several smaller adjustments to the arrangements in both children's rooms. Living areas, 6 changes. The couch position, the arrangement of the coffee table items, the placement of decorative objects on the mantelpiece. She had rearranged the items on our mantelpiece, which included framed photographs, and had placed them in a different order than I had them, and several smaller adjustments. Garage, 4 changes. The tool organization, the seasonal item storage, the donation box. Outdoor areas, 3 changes. The patio furniture arrangement, 2 other small adjustments to the outdoor space. When I read this list to myself on the evening after Barbara left, it looked, in aggregate, like a different home. Not a dramatically different home. The same walls, the same rooms, the same fundamental layout. But the organization within those walls, the specific arrangement of the things that make a home, that allow you to function in your own space with the efficiency of long familiarity, had been recalibrated to someone else's preferences while I was absent. I live in my home. I use it every day. I know from my professional understanding of physical therapy that people develop embodied familiarity with their environments. They reach for things without looking because they have built a motor memory of where things are. Barbara's reorganization had disrupted my embodied familiarity with my own home. I was now, in my own kitchen and my own closets, a person in an unfamiliar environment. Not dramatically unfamiliar, just off. Just slightly wrong, in the specific way that slightly wrong is more exhausting than dramatically wrong, because you cannot identify and address it cleanly. This is what I brought to the conversation with Chris. Not the emotional weight of it, not the feeling of violation, not the frustration. The list, the categories, the consequences, the specific, documented, photographed record of what had happened in our home while I was working. I put it in front of him not as an accusation but as information. And then I asked the question. I want to address the discarded items separately because they are different in kind from the rearranged items. A rearranged item is still yours. It is simply in a different place. A discarded item is gone, and the discarding of items from someone else's home without their permission is a specific kind of boundary violation that is not about preference or efficiency. It is about ownership. Barbara discarded. The preserved lemons, unusual, unlikely to be used. The can of coconut milk, she did not like coconut milk and assumed I did not need it. The specific pasta, unfamiliar brand, she substituted a more familiar brand. The springform pan, she thought I had not used it recently and did not need it. The pastry brush, replaced with a newer one she bought without asking. The zester, she had a grater she thought served the same purpose. It does not. Several food items from the pantry that she determined were past their usefulness. Some were not. And the entire donation box. Total items discarded. 11 that I could identify. Possibly more from the donation box, which I had not fully cataloged before the visit. I want to tell you about the preserved lemons specifically because they are the item I think about most. I had made them myself. In August, I had made preserved lemons in a mason jar following a recipe I had been wanting to try for 2 years. The process takes a month. You pack the lemons with salt, and they preserve in their own juice. They were ready in September, and I had been keeping them for the right dish. I had been planning a Moroccan chicken dish that uses preserved lemons, and that I had been putting off making because we had not had the right occasion for it. Barbara found them in the back of the pantry. She decided they were old and unusual and not something we would use. She threw away the jar. She did not ask. What are these? She did not ask. Do you need these? She did not ask. Is it okay if I discard this? She made a judgment about something in my home that she did not understand and she discarded it. I had spent time making those lemons. I had been planning to use them. They were mine. They are gone now because someone visiting my home decided she knew better than I did about what I needed in my own pantry. The preserved lemons are the one item I bring up when I describe this situation to people, because they capture the essence of what the discarding means. Not just the practical loss, I can make more preserved lemons, but the specific quality of having something you made yourself, that you were looking forward to using, removed from your home by someone who did not understand its value. The object was not theirs to evaluate. The home was not theirs to edit. The evening Barbara left, I waited until the children were asleep. Chris and I were in the kitchen, Chris's kitchen now, reorganized in ways he had found pleasant during the visit because it looked cleaner and more organized than before, and I said, I need to show you something and I need you to look at it before you respond. He said, okay. I opened my phone, I showed him the list. Not all 47 entries in sequence. I gave him the document and I let him scroll. He scrolled for a long time. He was quiet throughout. He stopped at a few entries. I could see him pausing, reading. He paused at the preserved lemons. He paused at Maya's toys and the 20 minutes of distress. He paused at the donation box. When he finished, he put the phone down on the counter. He said, I did not know it was this much. I said, I know. He said, she was trying to help. I said, I know that too. He said, some of these things I thought were fine. The kitchen, she made the kitchen look really good. I said, the kitchen looks good. It does not work the way my kitchen works. When I reach for something, it is not where I reach for it. I am adjusting every day. This is my kitchen and I am adjusting to it. He was quiet for a moment. I said, I want to ask you something. I need you to think about it before you answer. He said, okay. I said, would you have let me do this in your mother's home? He looked at me. I said, if I had visited your mother for 2 weeks. If I had, while she was at work, reorganized her kitchen and her pantry and her closets and her children's toy system and her garage and her outdoor furniture. If I had discarded items I decided were unnecessary without asking her. If I had done 47 of these things in 14 days and presented every one of them as a gift I was giving her, would you have let me do that in her home? He was quiet for a long time. I said, I am not asking rhetorically, I am asking genuinely, would you have let me? He said, no. I said, why not? He said, because it is her home, because she has the right to have her home the way she wants it. I said, yes. We were quiet for a moment. Then he said, I see what you are saying. He said it with the quality of a man who has arrived at something he had not allowed himself to fully arrive at during the visit, who had been seeing his mother's activity as love and helpfulness and had not translated it through the question I had just asked. The question required the translation. Once he had made the translation, the picture changed. My home had the same right that his mother's home had. And his mother's helpfulness had not honored that right. I want to stay with that question for a moment, because I think it is the most important thing I said in the entire 14 days. The question was not designed to be unanswerable. It was designed to create equivalence, to place my home and his mother's home on the same footing. Chris had been applying a double standard, not consciously, not maliciously, but clearly. His mother's home was a space that I would be expected to respect unconditionally, while my home was a space where his mother's helpfulness could operate without constraint. The double standard was invisible to him because the two homes had always occupied different positions in his emotional landscape. His mother's home was the home of origin, the home of childhood, the home of the authority figure whose preferences had always been the organizing standard. My home was newer, was ours rather than his, but had never fully been given the same standing in his understanding. His mother was a person whose home deserved complete respect. I was his wife, and the home was also ours, and his mother was being helpful. The question made the invisible visible. Would you have let me, in her home, the same things, 47 of them? The answer, obviously, was no. He would never have let me do this in his mother's home. He would have been horrified if I had attempted it. He would have stopped me after day one, gently but clearly, because her preferences for her own home would have been self-evidently beyond my authority to override. My preferences for my own home were not beyond Barbara's authority to override. That was the implicit message of 14 days of daily reorganization. That was what I needed Chris to see. He saw it, not immediately, not without the work of sitting with the question for a few minutes, of following the logic through to the place where the double standard became undeniable. But he got there. And where he got to was, you deserved the same thing my mother deserved. The same right to your own space organized your own way, and she did not give you that. He said, what do you need from me? I said, I need us to agree that the next time she visits, she asks before she changes anything, and if she changes something without asking, I need you to address it with her in the moment, not after the visit. In the moment, on the day. He said, I can do that. I said, I need you to understand why it matters, not just agree to it as a logistical arrangement. I need you to understand that this house is mine, ours, and that the way we organize it reflects our life together, not a standard that someone else gets to impose on it, even if that someone else means well. He said, I understand that now. And I believed him, not because he had always understood it, but because the question had made understanding it unavoidable. The conversation on the night Barbara left lasted 2 hours. It was not the 2 hours of a fight. It was the 2 hours of two people who have been together for 5 years and have a real partnership working through something that they had been navigating around without addressing directly. Chris called his mother the following day. He told her that he loved her and that the visit had been wonderful in many respects. He told her that the changes she had made to the house had been a significant number and that some of them had affected the way Jessica used the kitchen and the children's spaces in ways that had been difficult. He told her that in future visits, he would need her to ask before making changes. He said it with warmth and without accusation, in the way that Chris handles difficult conversations, indirectly enough to not feel like a criticism, directly enough to be understood. Barbara received it. She was not defensive. I had been slightly afraid she would be defensive, would feel that her help had been rejected, would retreat into hurt. She was, apparently, contrite in the way of someone who had genuinely not understood the impact of what she had been doing and who received the new information honestly. She said, "I thought I was helping. I can see how it was too much." Chris told me this afterward. I said, "That is generous of her." He said, "She is a generous person, she just did not know where the line was." I said, "That is why we needed to tell her." He said, "Yes." He replaced the whiteboard on the refrigerator. He found the springform pan at a kitchen supply store and bought it. He could not replace the preserved lemons, those take time and will require another August. He ordered a jar of preserved lemons from an online specialty shop as a gesture toward the gap. I rearranged the kitchen over a week, a little at a time, back to the logic that made sense to me. I did not redo it all in one evening. I let it happen gradually, restoring things as I used them, allowing the familiarity to rebuild. The kitchen is mine again. It took about 3 weeks. Barbara is coming for a visit in the summer. A week, not 2 weeks, and with an explicitly discussed framework for how it will work. She can ask about things she notices. She can offer to help with specific tasks if we say yes. She does not make changes without asking. Chris and I are agreed on this, and Chris will hold the line if it needs to be held. I am cautiously looking forward to a visit that does not require a documentation system. I want to tell you what the 47 changes taught me, in addition to what they taught Chris, because I learned things from the documentation that I would not have learned from simply enduring the visit and feeling frustrated. I learned that I had been minimizing. Each individual change was small enough that naming it in the moment would have felt petty, would have felt like I was picking a fight over a moved coffee maker. But the accumulation was not petty. 47 changes in 14 days is a systematic reorganization of a home. The documentation allowed me to see the system rather than the individual instances. The system was what needed to be addressed. I learned that Chris and I had a gap in our understanding of the home that had not been visible until the visit exposed it. He had been experiencing our home as primarily his, not consciously, not in the way of someone who would say that, but in the way that produces a double standard when applied to mothers and wives. The visit made the gap visible. The question made it named. The conversation gave us the chance to close it. I learned that documentation is not the same as grievance. The list I kept was not a list of offenses I was building a case out of. It was a record that allowed me to speak from evidence rather than from feeling. When I sat down with Chris, I did not have to say, "She changed everything and it has been overwhelming." I could say, "Here are the 47 specific things, in the locations where they occurred with the consequences." That is a different conversation. A better one. I also learned something about Barbara that made the post-visit period more compassionate than I had expected to feel. She genuinely did not know. She is a woman who has spent 30 years making things better in the spaces she inhabits. She has never had anyone tell her that the improvement was unwelcome. No one had ever asked her, "Would you have wanted this done in your home?" No one had ever required her to translate her helpfulness through that question. Chris required it. She received it. She adjusted. That is what a boundary looks like when it is set correctly, not a wall that excludes, but a line that defines. Barbara now knows where the line is. I now know that Chris will hold it. And the home is mine again, which was all I needed it to be. I am 31 years old. I am a physical therapist. I think every day about the relationship between people and their physical environments. I know that where things are placed matters. I know that embodied familiarity, the way you move through a space you know well, is built slowly and disrupted quickly. I know that a home is not just shelter. It is the specific, personal physical expression of how you live. What I keep from 14 days and 47 changes is the document. Not as a grievance, its purpose has been served, and I am not carrying it forward as an ongoing complaint. I keep it as the record of what good documentation allows. It allowed me to see the pattern I would otherwise have managed in pieces. It allowed me to speak from evidence in a conversation that needed evidence. It allowed Chris to see the full scope of what had happened, rather than the individual instances he had been explaining away one at a time. I also keep the question, would you have let me do this in your mother's home? I keep it not as a weapon but as a standard. The standard says, my home deserves the same respect as anyone else's home. The home we built together deserves the same respect as the home Chris grew up in. That is not a hostile standard. It is the minimum fair one. And I keep the knowledge that my husband, when given the full picture in a form he could not explain away, arrived at the right place. That is worth keeping. Every day I came home to a house that was mine in name only. I documented 47 reasons why. Then I asked one question. The question changed things. That is what I keep. If you stayed until the end, thank you. This story is for every person who has come home to a home that has been altered without permission. For every woman who has watched a mother-in-law reorganize her kitchen and felt the specific, unnamed frustration of knowing something was wrong but not having the words for it. For every person who has been told they were being given a gift when what they were being given was a lesson about whose home it was. The question I asked Chris is available to everyone. Would you have let me do this in your mother's home? Ask it, not as an attack, as a mirror. The answer tells you what the double standard is. And I want to say one thing about documentation. It is not paranoia, and it is not aggression. It is the practice of seeing a pattern clearly before you name it. 47 changes look very different from one coffee maker that got moved. If you are in a situation where you feel like something is happening but you cannot name it yet, start a list. The list will tell you what the thing is. Drop your city in the comments. Tell me if your home has been rearranged without your permission. Tell me what you did. I read every single one. Subscribe, hit the bell, share this. More stories coming. I'll see you next time.